Hi guys, Nancy Lewis from Leslie Schools. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed an actor. Her name is Lisa Helmi Johanson. And we talked for a while on Zoom, and I loved talking to her. She is simply amazing. And she did such a nice job of telling her story from childhood to now that I asked her, instead of me throwing questions out at her, if she would just be willing to tell her story. Before I show you that clip, I would like to tell you a little bit more about her. She was born in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C. Among other things, she is known for Avenue Q playing the part of Christmas Eve on a national tour for almost 2 years. Upon returning to New York City, she landed many more projects. When I asked her what her dream role was, she said she would like to originate a role, meaning she would like to be the first to do it. And now I give you Lisa Helmi Johanson.
Hi there. Well, thanks so much for having me. Okay, well, my journey from to get to New York. So I grew up in Northern Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C., and, I grew up actually studying musical instruments. My family's not particularly artistically oriented, and but thankfully I started out on instruments, started with piano, and then I started violin in public school, and in middle school ended up choosing between the two of them as to which one I wanted to really focus on. I chose violin and was pursuing that more seriously for a while. But what also happened in middle school was I participated in my first community theater production. I guess before that, technically, because I was a horribly shy child, to the point where my mom was like, I have to do something about this, she made me do the children's choir at my church. And so I started that when I was pretty young. I think I was probably only 4. But I was just so scared of strangers and just wouldn't talk to anyone except for her and my family, and like people that I got more comfortable with. But and thankfully, I think that actually helped me to get used to the idea of performing, where I knew if I had a solo, it meant I had to, no matter if I liked it or not, I had to go up to the little microphone, sing my solo, and then I go back and I just sing with everyone else. And we did like little mini musicals, I guess, with the children's choir as well while I was growing up. But that was the extent of my theatrical exposure, really. But I think it was still important, and just, the tiniest of toes in the water. But then I finally did my first production of an actual musical, and it was The Sound of Music. And I was the only person of color in the show, and I was one of the children. I was Louisa, who doesn't do much, but at least I was in it. And had fun, learned choreography, all these things. And I was hooked. I was like, this is great. And I did other community theater productions, always at my church. But thankfully, luckily enough, my church actually hosted a pretty broad community of community actors. And performers who would all audition. So it was a much larger scope of community. And, but it was actually my senior year of high school that kind of shifted things for me, because I had always been in orchestra. I had never done choir, because orchestra was my elective, my music elective. And my senior year, because I had finished a few other requirements early, I was like, well, let's do some fun things. How about I'll join choir? Why not? So I go to audition for the choir director, and he was like, okay, you've never done this before, I don't know you. And he had me sight sing, which for me as a musician, an instrumentalist, I only knew that as sight reading. So I was like, sight sing? And I was like, so I just make the noise of the notes that I'm reading? And he was like, yep. I was like, okay. And because I was an instrumentalist, I was good at it. And so he immediately was like, and had me audition for a slew of different choirs. all-state honors choirs, a couple different honors choirs and things like that, and I got into them. And he single-handedly really changed the course of maybe my life in that time because of him and being exposed to this different world of classical singing. It put on my radar that you could major in voice, which I kind of knew but kind of didn't. You know, I always knew you could major in instruments, and I knew there were opera singers, but like I didn't necessarily like. It was never legitimized to me as a profession, I guess, is a more articulate way of saying that. And so I did stay in state, and I think that that's something that I think with the knowledge I have now, I would have put more consideration into maybe applying to other schools out of state. But the benefit of me going in state and getting a partial scholarship for voice was that it was a small enough program that after my first semester of double majoring in choral education and psychology, I actually got into the spring musical. And so again, this is my freshman year of college. And I did the musical, and I was one of the only music majors in the musical. Usually it's only theater majors. And I did it, and I was like, what am I doing with choral ed? I have a passion for teaching someday in some way, probably. But I was like, this is what I need to do. And so, much to my parents' chagrin, I changed my second major from psychology, choral ed. Wait a second. That's right. So I was majoring in vocal performance because I was there on partial scholarship. My double major was choral ed, and I was doing the honors program for psychology. That wasn't worth it either because honestly, being a music major is wonderful craziness. And then adding on or changing to musical theater was also a lot because a lot of times in college programs when you're doing artistic majors, you have, you know, it's not just a regular class where it's like, oh, I have to read this chapter this week and then I'm done. You have to practice. You have to memorize. You have to rehearse. You have to, you know what I mean? There's a lot more that goes into all of your classes. So thankfully I changed that major. So I ended up finishing out college double majoring in vocal performance. So I got a Bachelor of Music in Vocal Performance and a Bachelor of Arts in Music Theater. Now this is something that is not very common. And as y'all look into different options for college and different music programs, theatrical programs, whatever they may be, you'll find that they often do not allow that double major. And it's kind of for good reason. It's a lot. But I think that there's a little bit of a lack of working togetherness between a lot of music departments and theatrical departments that I think is unfortunate because I think that there's so much that the different areas of expertise can really complement each other. For instance, I consider myself lucky, even though I went to a really small school that no one's ever heard of. One, I got a liberal arts education, which I do think is important. I think conservatory training, if you really know that's your thing, cool. I still think even if you hate biology, I think it's good to have to take it. I think it's good to have to write a few papers about history. I ended up learning that I was good at statistics. I never knew. And, because it just broadens your mind, broadens your perspective, and I think it hones skills that may not seem directly applicable, but, writing papers may not seem important, but it's still cultivating your mind. And it's a really broadening kind of activity, though it sucks at the time. So I do actually personally speak highly of liberal arts education, but conservatory, I totally get it. You're in it to win it, and I'm not going to say that I wasn't totally consumed by the music department and the theater department. But thankfully, because those majors are not usually allowed, my professors, after my first year, knew that I was a hard worker. So when I started having to ask them to, one, override my credit limit so that I could take 22 to 25 credits a semester, which you may not know yet, but it's a full semester load is generally considered 18 credits. So I was taking a lot of credits. And sometimes, because of the two majors, I would have to have, like, 1 year, I had to have my choir director sign off on me still taking choir, even though I was also signing up for the next level acting class that I had to take that semester so that I didn't have to wait 2 years for that class again, so that I wasn't held back with graduating. But it meant that I had to leave chamber choir every Friday a half hour early to go to the other class, which is not going to happen everywhere. So for that, I am lucky, because I was a vocal performance major who had to learn how to act, and conversely, I was a musical theater major who knew how to read music, write music, ear training, everything, you know. And I think those are both such important complementary skills to learn. That may have just darkened on you, sorry. So anyway, college, only had 1 extra semester because I busted my butt. Excuse me. And I moved to New York pretty soon after. Pardon. We cooked some like chili pepper, and now I'm coughing from it because my apartment has a lovely aromatic smoke of chili pepper. Don't worry, it's not coronavirus. So I moved up to New York pretty soon after. I will also mention that while I was living in Virginia and in college, I visited New York City as much as I could, which wasn't that much, but it was at least once a year, every year of college. And I know that, you know, y'all are in the Midwest, and that's maybe not very easy to do, because I was able to take a cheap overnight bus. I wouldn't do it now, but I did it then, and that's the time to do it when you're that young. And I visited the city because I wanted to know, on a deeper level, like, what is this place that I want to move to? You know, because I did know that I wanted to move to New York and pursue a career in the arts. But I didn't want to move up starry-eyed, not knowing what I was getting myself into. And I'm not going to say that visiting the city once a year made me, like, totally in the know-all about how to live in New York. It didn't. My first apartment, we were totally overcharged because they knew that we were 2 girls from suburban Virginia moving to New York, and they totally took advantage of that. Now, that said, we're still lucky because it was, you know, recently renovated, in a safe neighborhood, all those things, but we definitely got charged too much money. But sometimes you have to learn lessons the hard way, you know, which is a thing to definitely not be afraid of in wanting to move to a different city. Learning lessons and making mistakes is it's just part of it, in every element of life. And I don't think that it should ever be a reason to hold you back from trying something. I think taking risk is the best way to know how great you can become. Because if you don't take the risk, you'll never know. And being scared of an expensive city, being scared of people being mean, and the hustle being hard, you know, those are all real things, to be sure. But I am not someone who thinks that it's unsurmountable. Because I moved to New York and I knew no one. I had saved up money. I busted my butt, you know, saving money while I was still working or in school in Virginia. I worked a part-time job in the ticket office for our performing arts center, which was great. And I moved to New York, and thankfully got a temp job pretty early on with Scholastic Incorporated, the publishing company, which was really great. And you know, there's a big stereotype of actors always being servers in restaurants, which makes sense because it's flexible and it's fast, pretty good money usually. But the other side of that coin is that you have to use your voice a lot, and sometimes you have late hours. And so personally, I have always liked temp jobs instead, office jobs. I'm much happier listening to music and doing, stuff on a computer. And it saved my voice for auditions too. And so with this temp job that I found, they helped me find a job that was also flexible. So I was able to move, got this temp job, was able to make my own hours, like schedule my own hours based on the auditions I wanted to go to. And I certainly was not rolling in dough, but I had my budget, I packed my lunch every day, and I made it happen. I had no debt, right? Which is important. Kids, educate yourselves about credit cards. It's not worth it. Because there's just so many people who get into debt really fast, and that is a really big obstacle once you are there. So, now, practice now. Ask your parents. I don't know how old you all are, if there's an age range. If you don't have your own bank account yet, ask if you can open one and start just learning what it means to manage your money. And to get a very, very, very baby step credit card if maybe you're a little bit older and going to college soon, but as something where it's like, cool, buy a pack of gum, pay it off, and build credit, right? Because these are all important lessons that you're not necessarily taught in school, but if you don't learn them before you are living on your own, it matters. And you can make mistakes, which is okay, but if you can avoid certain mistakes, why not, right? So I moved up, non-union, of course, and just started submitting for everything I could submit for, and I sat at union auditions, which I could find through Actors Equity Association online. They post their auditions, as well as Backstage Online was another resource that I used a lot then, to find out about these auditions. Now, this part sucked a lot because you would get there so early in the morning. And you would sit and wait and wait and wait and wait, and sometimes not be seen to audition. And this is, I will tell you now, be prepared and make your peace with it as best you can. This is where the first huge dose of resilience is really necessary, because it's hard. It's really hard, and it takes people with connections usually, or just an absolute lightning strike kind of luck to be in the right place at the right time to get a break really early on. It's not impossible, but it's not common, right? So this is the first lesson in resiliency that is very real. And, but I did. And sometimes you were seen. Yay for the days you were seen, right? And the other thing too, you make friends in line. And once you find people who are going to be going to the same auditions as you, sometimes you sign each other up. You try to help each other out as best you can, because it's hard for everyone. So, it's hard being non-union. It is. I promise it is. But stick to it. And here's my other 2 cents about union versus non-union, because I had a lot of friends who were like, oh, I'm not going to become union until I earn enough credits to become union. And my course of action, so I'll continue on with my story and then get back to that a little bit, is that, so 1 month after I moved, I was going to, so many auditions every week, as many as I could, and submitting every day. And there's other resources now, like Actors Access is another subscription service that you can submit through. And I booked my first off-Broadway show 1 month after moving to the city. Now, yes, awesome and a big deal in some ways, but I was just the tiniest of roles, and I was an actor-musician in the show. So my instruments came in handy because I played violin in this show. And I had no lines. But, and here is the big but, which is a strange thing to say, is that I got to watch seasoned Broadway actors work. And I guess not all Broadway. Some people were pretty new out of grad school, but like the top grad schools in the nation. And since then, one of those people in the first show I did in the city has won a Tony Award. 2 years ago, he won. Another one, got into Harry Potter on Broadway. Another one was in Of Mice and Men a few years ago, and he's been on like multiple Netflix shows. So many people from that show. And another one of the guys was originally a TV star anyway, which is partly why he was cast. And I watched them work. I showed up for a rehearsal that I was not called for, so I could watch them work. And here's another 2 cents of mine on education. Education can come in many different ways. Some people go to grad school, and that can be amazing. It can be life-changing. It can be career-changing. It can also be life-changing in a bad way, because a very real element of grad school is the debt that you accrue for most grad schools. Now, if you go to a free grad school, all the power to you. If you can get in, that's a totally different ballgame. And then at that point, it's just a matter of if you want to take the time to go. But, I have phenomenally talented friends who have gone to grad school, some of the best in the country. ACT, NYU, Harvard's, Yale, and there's a lot of them. Even people who've been on Broadway who have said, I wish I hadn't gone to grad school because of the debt. Not because they don't value the training they got, but because of how burdening the debt is. Because the fact of the matter is that there's no guarantee in how much you will work and how regularly you will work as an actor once you graduate. So my personal experience is that my grad school, my continued education, which has been so real because I am leagues beyond the actor I was when I first moved to New York. And it's been years, many years, but that I learned my grad school has been by doing. So I learned from these actors, watching these really seasoned actors work, because that off-Broadway show led to another off-Broadway show that I did. I got to watch a whole new cast of amazing, really highly educated and highly experienced actors work. And that was an education. And then getting cast and learning. Every single show you do, you will learn and grow, especially if you are open to it. Sometimes it can feel scary and vulnerable when you are getting feedback, notes, ways to change a character, ways to change how you're singing a role, things like that. But if you take it as an opportunity to grow and be cultivated and take it with an open heart, a strong spine, you got to be strong. There is an element of strength, but I think the strongest part of you needs to be your spine, your integrity, and not your armor. If you have armor up here, if you have armor over your heart, your open-heartedness to your art, that generally will only limit you. Because the greatest art is what communicates to other people. It's what reaches other people. It resonates with an audience. And I don't know many people who have closed hearts who are able to resonate in deep, meaningful ways. Not to say it's not possible, but it will help you also in being set up to have a healthier resilience, because it is a hard industry, a very hard industry. The highs are so high and the lows are so low. I'll have to say that, all the times that I've gotten so close to getting on Broadway, you're so close. And then realizing you, between the two, were not the one chosen, is some of the lowest of the lows, even though you were that close. And I have to speak from my own experience, is that not getting on Broadway from that close is actually almost the farthest from Broadway I feel. And I give myself a day to grieve. I do. Because you have to acknowledge that when you put your heart into something, which I think is the only way to do your best and most authentic work that only you can do, that is unique and special to you, is when you bring your heart, because you are a unique individual. That does put your heart on the line. And this industry is full of heartache. So, you have to be aware of that. And I think you can't pretend it's not real, because then you'll repress things in unhealthy ways and probably end up quitting. Honestly, I've seen it a lot. People who don't grieve the hardships of our industry are often more unhappy, and they will often give up. And I think you have to know your inner worth, know your inner talent, and know that no matter what happens around you, no matter what the feedback is that you get, take it with a grain of salt. Sure, there's probably a lesson that you can take from it, ways to improve constructively, but do not let the outside world change what you know to be true about yourself, which is how valuable you are and how talented you are. Because knowing and owning your worth and operating from that place of worth is going to up your resilience. It's going to make you a great person to work with. And those two elements will lead to more success than just talent. I promise. And again, you know what? This isn't any industry. But especially to speak to New York and theater in particular, everyone's talented. Literally, everyone's talented. I mean, sometimes you see bad people, but sometimes, you know what I mean. Figuratively speaking, there are so many people who are so good at what they do, but are you a good person to work with? Casting directors learn that. So once you start working, they learn, they ask, and then they tell when they bring you in for something else. If it's not literally a session with a casting director this past week online, a casting director, quote, said that a directing team that was once between two people for a role turned to the casting director, who at that level is usually not as active in casting. They bring the people in and then they let the team decide, right? But at that moment, to decide who got that role, the director turned to the casting director and said, "Do they show up on time? Do they generally show up on time for their auditions that you've had them come in for?" Being on time took someone's job away. Which was a pretty, startling thing. I mean, but think about what that means. It means that you're a person who shows up on time, and that's an element of reliability. So there's a lot of elements besides just being talented. Now, you do need to keep working on your craft. I stopped taking voice lessons because I was like, I know so much about pedagogy, I'm fine. And after a long tour, where, to be fair, I was singing a lot of really varied, difficult material. It was the tour of Into the Woods, and I was playing both Rapunzel and Little Red Riding Hood. So I was singing very high, legit soprano, because they even had different arrangements in the production we did to go up to a high B natural. Are you choir students? I think you are. High soprano B natural, but then I was also belting Little Red Riding Hood. And I had to learn how to play the trumpet for the callbacks of the show because they wanted her to also play trumpet. So I learned trumpet. So in addition to this, I had all of the mouth tension from playing trumpet while belting Little Red and singing Rapunzel legit. I was not in voice lessons regularly, and I got back from that tour, and I had to go to voice therapy. And that's okay. I think there's a weird stigma for vocalists in having vocal injuries, but just to lay this foundation for you now, vocal injuries are the same as athletic injuries. You know, football players, soccer players, you know, you'll pull a calf muscle, you'll pull a hamstring, you'll do those things. It happens. It doesn't make them a bad athlete. And as long as you are in voice lessons with a good teacher and you're protecting your voice in, you know, reasonable ways, hopefully well-educated ways, it's okay to get hurt sometimes. It happens. We ask a lot of these two tiny little muscles, these two tiny muscles. And I went to voice therapy and it changed my career. And that was actually, I think, in a way, in my own journey of grad school, not grad school. This was another step in my grad school experience, was going to voice therapy and working with this incredible voice therapist who helped me learn how to speak with my authentic voice and really just access my breath support in a way that I had kind of started cutting off. And so that's another thing I just want to say, that vocal injury, though we do everything we can to protect against it, and you need to stay in voice lessons, if you do pursue this professionally, it's okay. You know, rest when you need to. We have to, if I could instill any lesson to learn now, it's, one, know your worth and your value as your unique and authentic self. Rest. Learn how to give yourself rest. And, oh, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. I could say so many things. Stay in lessons. Stay in lessons. It's an investment. Yeah, it costs money. Yes, it's tough. But stay in dance class. Stay in voice lessons. If I had started dance lessons as soon as, like, gone to dance class as soon as I moved to New York, I absolutely would have gotten on Broadway so much earlier. But I was like, oh, I just sing and act and I play instruments. I don't need that. Well, my first Broadway final callback was for the revival of Cabaret. And I got cut because I didn't, and the choreographer even gave me a second chance. I was the only person they gave a second chance to because they liked me. But I hadn't been in dance class in 4 years, 5 years, so I couldn't cut it. So, you know, it's a tough industry also because you have to stay really well-rounded in a lot of different ways. But who knows? Maybe liberal arts education also helps with that because it is about being well-balanced. Okay, well, I've talked a lot longer than I think I was originally supposed to. But I do just want to thank you for your time in this opportunity. And just speaking to the industry right now, where obviously we're all quarantined, there is no theater, but that theater's gone through this before. Theater went through this in ancient Greece. Theater went through this with the bubonic plague in England. Shakespeare still came out writing, you know, and we will come back. However, it will be up to our society to value the arts enough to help them really bounce back. You know, because despite the fact that we all turn to the arts right now in quarantine by watching TV and listening to music, which are art, people are really quick to forget how important it is to their well-being and the quality of their everyday life. So I guess that's a parting message I want to leave y'all with, is that you know, keep cultivating the arts in every way that you can in your life, other people's lives as best you can. You know, spread that music and arts love, because we will bounce back, but it is going to be hard. But obviously, safety is of utmost importance. My video this actually was delayed because I did end up getting sick in between us meeting. Don't think it was coronavirus, but nevertheless, it's a scary time to get sick in anywhere, but especially New York. And be well, be smart, educate yourselves, and lead with love. as best you can. And leading doesn't mean you have to be a public leader. You can be a leader just for yourself and in your own immediate surroundings. So thank you so much for having me. I am sure I left some things out from before, but hopefully this was was good. All right, be well. Take